Hi everyone! Recently I've been doing some videos to look back at 2020 and talk about what my favorite and least favorite books were, but I think it's time to start looking ahead to next year. I think we're all really ready for 2021, right? So I guess today's video will be kind of a combination of looking back and looking forward because I want to talk about the series that I need to continue reading in 2021. These are all series that I think I started all of them this past year, and I'm not counting books where I read maybe the first one in 2020 and the second book is only coming out in 2021. But I'm looking at really series that are existing series that I started reading that I'm not all the way caught up on. I'm fine with listing series that have entries coming out next year, but I wanted to focus on things that I've already started reading that I'm basically behind on or haven't had a chance to continue reading yet, but that I'd like to. Also, in that same vein, I'm not going to list anything that doesn't have at least 3 entries, although I'll count a trilogy as a series, I guess, for this sake. I don't know. Do I even have any I don't think I really have any trilogies on this list. I think all of these series are going to have at least 4 entries eventually, if they don't already. All of these are series that I have really enjoyed or have overall enjoyed so far, but just didn't really manage to prioritize as we come to the end of 2020. So they're all things that I want to continue on with. Most of them I definitely want to finish. There's a couple that, I want to read at least another book or two and see how I feel about it. So first I have The Faithful and the Fallen by Gwynne. This is a series that I really started hearing a lot about this year, and I definitely have really enjoyed it so far. I've read Malice and its sequel Valor, but there's 2 more books in the series that I haven't read yet. This is just a series that never quite made it to my favorites this year, even though I was really pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed it. If you've been watching me, you probably remember that Malice I had kind of mixed feelings about at first, but ended up really enjoying, and Valor, the sequel, I really liked as well. I always seem to take a while to get into each book, at least going off the first 2 books, and I wanted to continue, but I just managed to basically get sucked into my Cosmere reread and didn't have time to read any more books in this series. But there's 2 more, and I definitely want to finish them next year. I'm planning to finish the entire series. I know Gwynne has at least 1 more series, and I think it might be set in the same world, but I'm honestly not sure. So I'll just consider this a 4-book series, for the purposes of my planning. I'd like to read the next 2, which I think are called Wrath and Ruin. I'm not sure in what order. I've mentioned before that ruin is my nightmare title word. Since I was a kid, I've had such a hard time pronouncing that word. I tend to just say rune if I'm not paying attention. So authors, please, my wish for 2020 is that you would stop putting the word ruin in the title of every book, because I think I've read at least 3 or 4 books, or talked about 3 or 4 books that had ruin in the title this year, and it was rough for me. The next series, and one of the series I'm the most excited to continue, is the books of Babel by Josiah Bancroft. I loved Senlin Ascends. I thought it was just such a unique book. You can check out my review if you want to hear more of my thoughts on it, but I was expecting to like it based on what I'd heard, but I was really, really pleasantly surprised by how good it was in a number of different ways. It is just a really unique book, and I hope that the rest of the books in the series will live up to that. It definitely felt like one of those first books where you're not sure if the author is going to continue what the first book was like or really go in a totally different direction. Actually, now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure that what I've heard is that book 2 is actually quite different. So this could go either way, right? Hopefully book 2 and book 3, which are the ones that are out so far, hopefully they'll be just as good as book 1 and I'll like them just as much. Either way, I was planning to read book 2, I think last month, but again, the Cosmere reread basically took over my entire life along with just getting really busy. So this has just sort of been pushed back to 2021. But I really am looking forward to continuing this series. Book 2 is The Arm of the Sphinx, and book 3 is The Hod King. I think that's how you say it. And I'm pretty sure that book 4, which it will, I think, be the last book, is expected to come out in 2021 as well. So I could potentially finish reading this series next year. So I know I've been mentioning the InCryptid series by Seanan and McGuire basically non-stop recently on my channel. I actually picked up this series through my Hugo Awards reading project because it was a finalist for the Hugo Award for Best Series this year. It's really funny because Seanan McGuire had another book that was nominated, or that was a finalist for the Hugo Awards this year, and that was Middle Game, which is a much kind of a heavier, more serious book that was a finalist for Best Novel, and I was kind of neutral on it. I liked some things about Middle Game and other things I really didn't think worked. So I was curious to read more by her. I knew she had a number of long-running series, and then I decided to do the Best Series read as well as part of my Hugo Awards project. So I read the first book in all of the series that were finalists for Best Series, because obviously I could not read every series in its entirety. So the InCryptid series was definitely my best new find that I hadn't heard of on that best series list. The first book, Discount Armageddon, was just so much fun, and I am already 4 books into the series. I think book either 9 or 10 is coming out in 2021. There's a lot of them, but they're pretty short and light, very witty and entertaining, and each book, or every few books, the point of view character switches to another member of the family that the series follows. Honestly, I think I will probably catch up on this series in 2021, even though there are 5 or 6 books in this series that I haven't read yet, just based on the fact that I read 4 of them already in the last few months, and that I'm finding them a very fun escape from more serious reading. I think I can expect to finish or, catch up with the InCryptid series this year. Next year. It's still 2020, right? 2020 has gone on for a while. Seanan McGuire also has some other series like the October Day series that I haven't read but would like to check out at some point, but I'm sort of telling myself that I'm not going to start any of her other series until I finish reading InCryptid first, because I don't want to have so many ongoing series by Seanan McGuire, even though I really like her writing. Okay, so series number 4 that I am planning to continue in 2021 is A Chorus of Dragons by Jenn Lyons. I read the first book, The Ruin of Kings, this year, approximately the 17th book I picked up that had ruin in the title, and it basically started off really, really strong. I heard kind of mixed things about it going in. I hadn't really heard anyone that really loved it. I'd kind of heard some mixed reviews. That people thought it was kind of overly complicated and confusing. I actually really loved the beginning of the book. It had a lot of things I really like. It had clever footnotes and a frame story, a really interesting structure. I was really into it, but then the middle was kind of a total mess, and I basically lost all faith in what the author was doing, and then the end was okay. There were some things that slightly redeemed it for me. So I've been feeling really neutral about this series ever since then, because I think if I hadn't been so hooked when I first picked up the book, I wouldn't have been so disappointed as I continued reading. I meant to read book 2 already, The Name of All Things, and I think, subconsciously, I think I was putting it off. I think I'm afraid that it's going to be equally disappointing, and what I really want is somehow for this series to be as awesome as what was promised in the first couple of chapters. So I can't promise that I'm going to finish this series next year, but I'm going to give it one more book. I'm going to read book 2, and I'm going to see how I feel about it at that point. If I enjoy book 2, I'll probably keep going. I think this is another series where book 4 is supposed to come out in 2021, and that's supposed to be the last book. I hadn't noticed this before, but are people just writing quartets instead of trilogies these days? Does having a 4-book series prevent that dreaded middle book syndrome? I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to watch out for that. Series 5 that I'm planning to continue reading in 2021 is The Expanse by James S.A. Corey. This is another one, it had been on my radar for a while, but it was also nominated for the Hugo Award for Best Series. This is the series that actually ended up winning, which kind of makes sense because it is a very long-running and popular series. So I kind of used the Hugo Awards reading project as an excuse to try the first book in the series. I also have a friend who really recommended the TV series, but I wanted to at least start reading the book series before I tried the show. So I read Leviathan Wakes this summer, and I liked but did not love it. There was a lot about it that was very engaging, but I didn't connect to it all that strongly, and I think it was just a kind of science fiction that I wasn't really in the mood for, even though I think a lot about how the series was set up, a lot of it's really interesting. So I'm planning to read at least 1 or 2 more books in this series before I decide whether it's for me or not. I think there's going to be a wider variety of viewpoint characters as we keep going with the series. I think the plot's really going to open up as well, and I'm looking forward to all of those things. I think part of why I wasn't so into Leviathan Wakes is that the 2 point of view characters, I just didn't really connect to them that much. I thought they were only okay and not super well defined. I think I got more of a feel for them as the book went on, and I could see maybe developing an attachment to them, as a long series progresses, but I didn't feel like the character work was particularly strong in Leviathan Wakes. I'm definitely not motivated enough by this series to commit to reading all of them. I think book 10, which is the final book, is coming out next year, but I think I would read one or two more at least and reassess how I'm feeling about the series and whether I want to continue. The last series that I've started that I want to continue next year is the Memoirs of Lady Trent by Marie Brennan. Actually, when I looked this up, I saw that I read the first book at the very end of 2019. So it's been an entire year since I've read anything in this series, but I really liked the first one. I thought it was a lot of fun. So I've never mentioned this series on the channel, but the premise is that it's a Victorian science fantasy, basically. The series is set in an alternate Victorian era. The main character, Isabella, starts out as a young woman who is very interested in science, but she's trying to find a way to pursue it in a sort of socially acceptable way because she's very much expected to be a wife and a gentlewoman and a mother. And what she really wants is to explore and be a scientist. And so the first book was really showing how she started to pursue that career instead of necessarily fulfilling the roles that were expected of her. It reminded me a lot of one of my favorite series, the Amelia Peabody series by Elizabeth Peters, which is just straight up a historical mystery series where the main characters are a couple of Egyptologists. It's set in a similar time period and has a similar strong female character as the center of the series. The premise of the entire Memoirs of Lady Trent series is that obviously these are Isabella's memoirs, which she is writing as an older lady looking back at her life. So we know that she's going to end up as a very distinguished scientist. She's going to discover all of these things about dragons, and she's going to be a very eminent scholar. But as of the end of the first book, really all that had happened is she went on her first expedition and is just sort of trying to find her way in life. I got distracted by a lot of other things this year, but I really love the premise for this series, and the first book was very enjoyable. It was pretty light, but it had some serious things in it, and I'm looking forward to continuing this. Because it's been so long since I read the first one, it definitely isn't a priority, but it's just on my radar for a series I really would like to continue. So those are all the series that I've started that I need to or want to continue reading next year. Most of them I'm really looking forward to. I know a few I'm sort of delaying judgment until I read one or two more books in the series, but hopefully they will all be awesome. I'm sure I'll also end up starting lots of series next year, so let me know what you guys are planning to read next year. Are there any ongoing series that you're planning to finish up, or are there any series that you're planning on starting? I know I need to try to not bite off more than I can chew in terms of what I'm planning to read, but it's always fun looking ahead and thinking about what you want to read. So thanks so much for watching, and make sure to subscribe if you want to see more videos from me.